Is that blowing? It's blowing. You know, you can turn it up. Everyone got the papers? Everyone got papers? Where's it go? I have one. Just make sure everyone has. Everyone has?
Yeah.
Oh, they give them out. Oh. Yeah. How's it working out? Everyone's signing in? And
Yeah.
Yeah. Hold up. Oh.
So when we go to the coffee, I'm staying home. Do I have to recite any of these? I'm not sure which one would be appropriate.
Yeah. 1 second. So this. This here is like when you're at the grave. That's probably the English is. Oh no, it's not this one. Here.
Which is what phrase?
Pray on the visiting the graves. So this you go for the grave. Yeah. This you can say anytime.
Which one?
Anytime. This one. Yeah. And this one. This one. You if you're in the synagogue, in the same Kaddish, so you recite this one.
Okay.
What's the rest of the book? No. Here you can also, it's your mother, right? This also you should recite at the mother's grave. So this one at the grave.
I think we're ready.
Ready?
Yep, I'm just going to enable the microphone. I think we're able. Start this. Is this okay over here, you think?
Oh, I don't know.
I think we should be fine.
Then what's this?
Sensitive enough to pick up everything. Okay.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
But it's recorded anyways on this thing, no? Or not?
No.
So maybe we should just put it on this side,
Okay.
just in case.
You know what? Let me just reset it. One more time. Sorry. Thank you. Can you ask the audience if they...
Everyone hears me?
Just
Yeah.
to do one final sound check?
Okay. Just making sure everyone hears. They're going to respond? Jeff, are we okay?
No, I didn't.
You didn't hear a response.
I didn't get any response from anybody. Okay, people saying they can hear.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so God willing, tonight we're going to get a little bit deeper. For those of you sitting in the back, you can come closer. We're going to go a little bit deeper into what we just started discussing. Which is the concept of gilgal neshamas, the idea of reincarnation. So in general, gilgal means, the word gilgal comes from the word like a galgal, which is something that's turning, which means that simply gilgal neshamas, the reincarnation of souls, means that every subsequent life, we're here for another individual purpose. Each individual soul is rooted in the great soul of Adam, or the Kadmon, male and female. He created them. We're a spark of each soul. There's 613 parts. And then there's the 600,000. And every part of soul, every aspect of this great soul becomes an individual soul. And the intention is to recreate the body of Adam, which means to recreate and go back into the tree of life through the tree of duality. This is what we talked about last week, but now we want to go a little bit deeper into how exactly this works. So gilgal, the word gilgal in Hebrew has the same numeric value as the word chesed, which is 72. Because we'll see soon that this concept of gilgal, of reincarnation, is ultimately a chesed, it's a kindness, God, from Hashem, for us to reach a certain type of soul elevation. And the concept, the idea of gilgal, both works externally and internally. Which means, externally means that each subsequent life, we're reaching another higher elevation. And it also works internally, which means that the person himself, herself, within a person's life, we're progressing. Which the idea of gilgal is that there's a spiritual evolution, that you're moving from one state to a higher state. Now, one of the things that we didn't discuss at all was a reincarnation, or a transmigration, into other forms of life. So we'll try to understand exactly how this works. In general, the human being, there's two aspects to the human. On one level, the human being is part of all of nature. And a human is just like a tree, just like a plant, just like a mineral, just like an animal. And yet, the human being also has the ability to become more. What that means is like this, that everything in creation has some form of nefesh. Nefesh is spirit. And it's an animating spirit. So there's something, let's say, for example, a stone. The nefesh of a stone is a nefesh hamakayim, the nefesh that gives it existence. And there's also the nefesh hamachayim, the nefesh that gives it life. And something that is more evolved, for example, vegetation, has a nefesh hatzemachas, has a vegetation soul. The concept of a soul, the concept of a spirit is that it moves the object along its own spiritual evolution. So it sustains the object, it gives it life, it's the life force of the object, it's the soul of the object, but it also pushes it forward. So the soul of a stone ensures that the stone remains a stone. That's what the stone is doing. That's what the soul of the stone is doing. The soul of a vegetative, something in the vegetative kingdom, is ensuring that an apple tree is producing apples. Now, the basic difference between something that's inanimate and something that's animate, we say that there are four distinctions. There are four types of creations. There's a daimim, sameach, achai, and medaber. Daimim means a silent or inanimate. Sameach means vegetation. Chai means a life. And medaber means a creature of speech. So daimim tzemeh chai medaber. So the lowest form of life is called a daimim. Daimim means silent. The highest form of life is called medaber, which is speech. So you go from silence to speech. Now, what does it mean that something is silent? Something that's silent means that it's not expressing itself. Something that's speaking is expressing itself. The more something can express itself, the more aliveness you see in the object. When you look at a stone is alive. You just don't observe the life in the stone because you don't have the proper eyes, the proper vision to see the life of the stone. But even on a scientific level, what you see as a solid object is actually not solid. And there are things moving about, and there's molecules, and everything's jumping around. But when you're looking at a stone, you see something that's silent. You just see a stone. But when you look at a vegetable, let's say you look at a tree, you see that the tree is alive. It's growing. The sun rises, and the tree moves towards the sun, and it moves towards its wetness, and it grows, and it expands. This is a higher form, a more complex form of life. So the nefesh is a higher nefesh in a tzemachas, in something that's vegetative, than over something that is inanimate. Then you have a chai, which is a living force. Let's say a creature, an animal. Something that's a living being has more life than even a tzemachas, something that's growing. Because something that is alive, not only does it expand in its own place, but it also can move about. It has much more life force. So a tree expands and grows. But the expansion of a tree is only in the location where it's growing from. You uproot a tree and all of a sudden it's not growing until you replant the tree. But an animal expands in the body. The body is small when it's young, and then it expands continuously or retracts, but it's constantly moving, it's constantly growing. And it also could move about. So it has a higher and more complex life force. You're following? So it goes from a daimim, which is silent, which means that it's there. It's just very quiet and we don't observe it. So there is a life force. There's a nefesh hamakayim and a nefesh hamachaya. Then there's a nefesh hatzemachas, which is a spirit that gives it life. And then there's even a nefesh hachiyunis, which is a life force, which is you see in the animal kingdom. Okay. And then there is the nefesh hamaskelis. Nefesh hamaskelis is the intellectual soul. Now, all these levels of consciousness and levels of spiritual life force exist from the lowest kingdom all to the highest kingdom. So when you go into the highest kingdom, we'll say the human being, because really that's the conversation. We're talking to humans. So we're having a conversation with humans, and we'll say like this: everyone has a part of them that's a nefesh hamakayim. The nefesh, the spirit that just allows their existence to be, physical existence to be. This nefesh hamakayim, incidentally, even after a person passes on, where the higher life forces of a person, which is the ruach and neshama, higher life forces leave the person's body, the person doesn't disappear. Right? The person is no longer alive, but the person still exists. How is the person existing? Because there's still a nefesh hamakayim. There's still an existing life force that still is attached to the body. This existing life force is connected to the higher life force, and it's like when you shut. It's not really an example, but if you close off electricity, you still have some level of electricity for the first few seconds afterwards. So the same thing also, life force is cut off from the higher life force, but the still nefesh hamakayim still exists within the body, and over a short period of time, that slowly dies down as well, and then the body completely decomposes. Besides the loose bone, besides one particular part of the body, but everything else ceases to exist. That's the nefesh hamakayim ceases to be. So it works on the evolvement of the human being is for nefesh hamakayim, which is the nefesh, the spirit of existence, to life force, to growth, to movement. These stages are also the same way we also evolve. The lower the nefesh is, and the way we're going to define lower and higher is, lower is more ego, higher is less ego. So the lower is more selfish, the higher it becomes more selfless. What does it mean that it becomes more selfless? It becomes closer to the reality of the Creator. The Creator is the ultimate, the source of everything. God is the source of everything. The source of everything is completely giving, selfless. That's what Hashem does, creates. That's a completely selfless act. So the closer a person becomes to their source, the more selfless they become. The further they are away from their source, the more selfish they become. So again, let's go back to understanding. When we talk about a soul, we say that this is the level of the soul. The level of your soul depends, the level of your soul at any moment depends in the spectrum between how selfish you are to how selfless you're becoming. Everyone begins life completely selfish. And that's actually probably a healthy thing. A little kid, a 1-year-old baby, needs to eat, and it cries. They cry. They don't ask their mother if you're tired. They don't ask the father if they're tired, maybe. They cry because they're hungry. And if they want something, they demand it. And that's probably healthy. But it starts off with a very selfish place. Selfish means that it's all about me. Just to serve me, to serve my ego, to serve myself. This is your lowest form of nefesh. There's no expression outward. It's only about inward. Now, of course, there's expression outward, literally, but on a metaphorical level, there's no movement outside of yourself. The movement is always directed from the outside in. You just want to receive. All you want to do as a little kid is to receive. Try to take a toy away from a 1-year-old. It's going to be very complicated. Because a child just wants to receive. And that is their nefesh. That is their ego. That is healthy. We have to have a nefesh. But we evolve. We grow throughout life. And we work. The way we evolve is that we go from the nefesh levels and all the levels of nefesh to the level of ruach. And from the level of ruach, we go into the level of neshama. What that means is as follows. We start life at the level of nefesh. And we are like a stone, a vegetation, and like a little animal. All we want is for ourselves to be. The more selfish the person is, the lower level their soul is at. Then we become a little bit more mature. Now we say that there's 4 levels. So you have the doimim, tzemeach, chai, medaber, the inanimate, the vegetative, the living, and the creature of speech. When the Torah describes Adam and Eve in their creation, it says, "Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chaim," he blew into his nostrils a breath of life, which is ruach. So the Onkelos writes, the translation of the Torah is that ruach memale became a creature of speech. So speech is connected to ruach. Ruach is wind, which means it's a higher evolved movement. Because my nefesh is about myself. My nefesh hamachaya is for myself to. Nefesh hamachayim is for my body to exist. Nefesh hamachaya is for my body to expand and to live. Nefesh hatzemachas is for it to grow. Nefesh hachiyunis is for it to eat and to be ambitious. But it's all about myself. It's all about me. Then a child all of a sudden realizes that there's somebody else. There's someone else in the universe. And they have to communicate with that other person. And if a person is really properly communicating with another person, they're entering into the other person's space. That's already the level of ruach. If I'm having a conversation with you, and you're having a conversation with me, and we're both understanding each other, now I'm leaving my space and entering your space, and you're leaving your space and entering into my space. That's already a higher form of a spiritual world, right? Because we're no longer selfish, but we're a little more selfless, because I can put myself aside and hear what you're saying. So this means that my soul is evolving. Then I reach a level of neshama. Now this process is hopefully the process the way we evolve throughout life. That we begin life very selfish, and then we reach a certain stage of maturity, and we have a shvas atzura. A shvas atzura means we become like our Creator. Because the nature of the Creator is to give, the nature of creation is to receive. The more we become like, the more we cultivate our nature to give, the more we become like the Creator. And the higher spiritual involvement we have. So this process, let's understand the depth of this. So this process of life, that moves through these stages, actually parallels life in the entire planet. Because we are, at some point, we're like stones. We can't speak, or we can't express ourselves properly. Then slowly we start moving about. And our bodies, so then we start expanding, we become like a tzamachas, we become like a vegetable. Our bodies start just growing. Then slowly we can start moving around and we become like an animal. Right? There's more movement and more movement and more movement. Now, just because physically we're growing from one state to the next doesn't necessarily translate that spiritually we actually evolved. Just because you're walking about, speaking and having conversations with people doesn't mean that you're still not functioning on the level of an animal, a vegetable, or a stone. Now, the best case scenario, which hopefully everyone in this room and everyone that's hearing and everyone in this world will achieve, is that they'll move from the nefesh into the ruach into the neshama, and then they'll go through the whole process of reincarnation, which means every individual soul will break itself off, which we spoke last week, and every soul becomes distinct, and next journey will be a new stage, a new evolvement. But what happens if a person lives their life and they were connected to the nefesh, purely the nefesh hamakayim, nefesh hamachaya, nefesh hatamachas, the purely selfish self. It was never about anything else besides himself. This is extreme cases, because we hope that at least some level of ruach and some level of neshama a person tapped into. We should just make clear a little bit that even when we say that a person reaches a level of ruach and reaches a level of neshama, there's the levels of ruach and neshama within nefesh as well. And that's the way we spoke about a little last week, that everything it's a holographic image. So the nefesh itself has a nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. And the ruach itself is nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. Each level has within it those 5 levels. So when we talk about a person evolves to a level of ruach, it doesn't necessarily mean to a pure ruach, it could be the ruach within the nefesh. But there's some movement. It's not just I. There's some cracking open, there's some penetrating of something that's larger. But if not, and a person passes on, what happens to the soul? We'll take questions later, otherwise we're going to, if you just write it down. What happens to this person's soul? The person that hasn't evolved more than, for example, a stone. According to the Kabbalists, this person will now enter into a stone. And a person that doesn't, and I'll explain what this means, and a person doesn't evolve more than a vegetative state will enter into a vegetative state. And a person doesn't evolve more than a chaya state will enter into a chaya state. Into an animal state. This form of gilgal, this form of reincarnation, is very different than everything that we spoke about before. When we talked about reincarnation before, we have to remember one thing. We spoke about the soul. And we said that the soul, which is our consciousness, is a composite of the backdrop of who we are. The backdrop of who we are is our spiritual quality, our spiritual nature that we have already before we have done anything in our lives. There's a certain quality. There's a certain inclination. We have certain positive inclinations and certain negative tendencies, but we have a certain quality. It's a backdrop. We said, imagine there's a sheet of paper, but the sheet of paper has already a coloring. And then we said that throughout life, we write our story. Life's a story. We're the author. We're writing our story, and every day we're writing another line, another few lines, and that becomes that becomes our story. At the end of life, we are the final book. What's in the book? Every single impression we had, every thought we had, every feeling we had, every emotion we had, every single experience that we had, the totality of who we are is this memory. Okay. This memory is not stored in the brain, like we said. It's stored in the soul, in this morphic field. It's stored in the energy of the self. And this soul, this individual spark of soul, which contains the entire memory of who we are, now becomes one with the great memory of Hashem, which in Kabbalistic language is called Bina on the level of Bria, which means that it becomes part, just to make it very simple, the individual memory becomes part of this collective memory. And it's a full memory for eternity. What exactly happens is another process of the afterlife process. But that's more or less what occurs. Then in the next life, the soul comes back down into this world. Which part of the soul comes back into this world? Not the part that we worked on. We said that the soul is multidimensional. It has 613. It has 600,000 dimensions. The soul, we gave you this simple example, will be of a cube, and you see it 4 sides. And the first life, the first side, is projected into this world. That's your genetics, your backdrop. That's projected into this world. You write your entire story on this page. This page now moves into Gan Eden, hopefully. Now, the other side of the page becomes manifest in person number 2. But person number 2 has no memory of himself being person number 1. And the reason why person number 2 has no memory of being person number 1 is because on a conscious level, person number 2 wasn't person number 1. Correct? So if you imagine this again, to make it very simple, here you have a page, and imagine this page is blue, and it's empty. Okay, see the page? And it enters into this world, and it's empty, and you write your story. This is the story. This is the backdrop. So the backdrop is the space that's maintaining and holding your memory. This is a spiritual quality. Everything's imprinted on the fabric of your soul. This soul now, after 120, is perfect. It goes into the afterlife journey, which we have to discuss another time exactly how this works. But it goes into afterlife journey, and now we say, okay, this story is perfect. It's published in Gan Eden, in paradise. What comes down now to person number 2? This side. You understand now? Now the page is actually divided in half. Because this side is here, and now this side is here. These two parts are part of one soul. But one side is reflecting blue, one side is reflecting red. One has chesed, one has gvura. So before they divided themselves, they were part of one soul. But in subsequent lives, each one was a different soul to a different person with a totally different genetic makeup. The relationship between person number 1 and person number 2 is that they're both part of the root souls. They're both connected within the root soul. Like we spoke about, there are different root souls. There's souls that are connected with the head of Adam, souls that are connected with the feet of Adam. So these two souls were connected with the head of Adam. But in subsequent lives, only one side was revealed in the first life, and another soul side was revealed in the second life. You're following? So, the reason why there is no memory for person number 2 is because person number 2, who has a blank sheet, has a color, but it's blank. There's nothing written on it because there's no imprinted memory. The imprinted memory is in Gan Eden, is in paradise. So person number 2 is blank, has no memory of his previous life. Now, in deep meditation, there's a connection between this part of the soul and the soul that still exists in Gan Eden. So it's possible that a person through Ruach HaKodesh or other techniques will have some premonition or some layover of memory. But generally, we don't remember our past lives. Most of us. However, in the case where we talked before, where the person hasn't evolved the level of Doimim Sameach Chai into Medaber, the person hasn't evolved from the state of inanimate, vegetative animal into human being. Now the person walks like a human, talks like a human, looks like a human, but is completely an animal. Or worse. Now I don't mean this in a derogatory way for animals, because animals are very selfish. There's nothing wrong with that. Animals don't have anything besides a selfish gene. That's part of their nature. They're not judged. A lion that kills because that's its nature, and it's actually perfect. Because animals are always perfect, and we'll talk soon. The only creature in nature who could be imperfect is the human being, who has free choice. So assuming a person never evolved into his human beingness, which means a person never activated their free choice, but everything was because of their instincts for survival. They acted like a tree would act when the sun comes up. And the same thing also, they acted, whatever they did in their life, purely from an instinctual, responsive, reactive place. So this person now exists as a human being, but is really functioning at the level of vegetation. Now, this person cannot move on to become part of the great soul within the great soul of Adam, because Adam is souls of human beings. You're following the metaphor? I mean, you don't have to take this mamish so literal, but this is the way we're going to try to understand this. This human being cannot become part of the souls of human beings. This human being has to enter into another state of life, into another form of life, for a particular period of time, be there, reach its elevation, and then it become human again. And now this is a very complicated technique, because what happens now, the entire self of who you are, assuming, let's call this person Chaim. This man Chaim lived till 120, lived a full life physically, but never evolved past the Chaya level. They were just a daimon tzimeach chai. They acted like an inanimate vegetative animal, always serving themselves, reactive and instinctual. This is the way they live their entire life. This person has a lot of memory. They lived 120 years. There's a full story. There's a full story. This page is full. From day 1 to 120, it's a big story. This memory cannot move now into Gan Eden. What happens to this story now is the entire story, which means the story with the memory, moves into another form of life. It doesn't become the soul, meaning the animating, enlivening, guiding spirit of the thing that it moves into, which means that let's say it moves into a cow. The cow is not going to start speaking, having human conversation now. The cow is not animated by this human soul. It's just the human soul that's trapped within an animal, or vegetation, or something that's completely inanimate. So there's two souls now. There's the soul of the living thing, or the soul of the vegetation, or the soul of the plant, that's giving it its life force. That's the soul of the apple tree that's saying, become an apple. That's pushing it to grow. It's saying, become an apple tree. And it gives off more apples. And simultaneously, there's also a soul that's trapped there of a human being, with the full memory of being a human being. Because it's the full soul. It's the published story. Instead of being published in Gan Eden, you're publishing a cow. Now, you can ask a question, okay, so what's the intention of this? What's the intention? So we started off the conversation that gilgal, the word gilgal, has the same numeric value as the word chesed. And chesed means that it's a kindness. This is a way for a soul to reach an elevation, even though it didn't achieve anything in this life. When a soul exists in another form of life, and there's a whole complicated system how it works, in which other form of life it enters, but the basic understanding is that it depends on the level of the soul spiritual involvement. There are periods of time that it goes into this, the soul enters into this animal. This is a living being, or a vegetation, or an inanimate, a stone. There's certain periods of time that it enters, and it existed for certain months of the year. And the Arizal actually details this in very great detail of which months of the year the soul elevate from daimon, from inanimate, and which months of the year do they elevate from tzemeach, and which one from chai. There's a whole process, but it goes in for a certain period of time. The intention is very simple. Everything of creation besides the human being, like we said before, is perfect. The only one that's not perfect, or potentially not perfect, is the human being, because he can make free choices and do something that's opposite of his internal spiritual nature. So in order for the soul to unlearn their negative behavior or reactive behavior, the soul enters into another form of life which is perfect. which is doing exactly what it's doing. The apple tree is being an apple tree, which really the human being should have been the human, but he wasn't. And by being there for a certain period of time, it learns its lesson, and it can finally be released. And some way through that, it can also experience some form of Gan Eden, some form of paradise. So it's a cleansing period for the soul to reach its proper potential. Because of that, let's say there's a soul of a human being in an apple, and you're going to eat now this apple. So now it becomes very interesting, because what you're going to do now is now you have the potential, because of your free choice, to elevate the soul that's trapped in this item of food. Or if you're walking down the street, for that matter, and this is a soul under your feet, connected into the inanimate objects under your feet, if you're going to walk with a higher consciousness and with an intention and make a blessing over the apple, and do it with kavanah, with intention, for the elevation of this food, for a higher purpose, then you have the potential to release the soul from its torment even before its allotted time. So if the soul has to exist in this apple for 6 months, because that's how long it has to finally unlearn its doing. But if a human being comes along, a day later, makes a blessing with a proper intention, that they can actually elevate the soul that exists within these animals, in the other fruits. This is the reason why. Besides everything else, we have to be very careful what we do in this world. Certainly, what we eat, because when you eat something, eating is always a process of taking in energy. You're always taking in energy. Even if the apple just has an apple soul, and you're eating the apple, you're taking in the energy of the apple soul. Whatever that is, it's some energy, some form of energy. You're not living off the physical object itself. Person doesn't live from the actual physical object. It's from the spirit of Hashem. The spiritual animating force is really what's giving us our chayas, giving us our life. So when you eat something, you think you're eating it because of the physical thing, but it's really the spiritual nourishment that you receive from it. That's how you exist. So when you eat something, you're internalizing whatever you're eating. If a person puts in, you say a person cooks or bakes something and puts in a lot of intention and a lot of love, you're eating that. But God forbid if the opposite, then you're eating anger. It's literal this way. You're bringing in energy. That's on one level. But then on a deeper level, you have to think about what happens if there's a soul there. Now the soul there is a very complicated soul, because this is a soul that hasn't yet been elevated. The soul that still has to work out its afterlife process. You have a big obligation that when you eat something, or else when you eat it, you should eat it with intention, make a proper blessing. And then you eat it for a higher purpose. Because if you don't, what you're doing then is you're bringing in to your life, internally, you're bringing in something that's potentially negative, something that's potentially harmful. The contrary to that is, this is what it says in a certain Kabbalistic text, which is it's a little bit, not for the conversation now, that tzaddikim like fish. That there's a custom of righteous people to eat fish. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but there's a custom of righteous people to eat fish. Tzaddikim like fish. And the reason is because Arizal writes that tzaddikim reincarnate if they need in fish. If a tzaddik needs some form of tikkun, they'll also exist within periods of time in a fish. Why would a tzaddik need a reincarnation? It's another whole conversation, because Gehenim has no shlita, has no power over, has no influence over a tzaddik. So the only way for any type of elevation is through gilgal, and the only way through this gilgal will be a reincarnation to fish. So therefore, fish is an animal, is a living being that doesn't have to go through a very dramatic, intense process in order to become food for human consumption, unlike other animals, which we don't have to get graphically involved. And the idea is that it has a higher form of life, and therefore it's more connected to the human being, and souls of righteous enter into fish. But the concept, the idea behind it is that you're elevating the food that you're eating, not only physically elevating the energy. of this life force, but you're elevating also sparks of souls that may exist within these forms of life. The Arizal and Chesed Avram and others bring down, I'll give you this an analogy of this, it brought down that a person that's a very arrogant person will reincarnate into a bee. A bee. That's what it says. A buzzing bee. Why a bee? Simple reason is because a person that's very arrogant, it's all about himself. But if they exist in a beehive, I don't know, it's a bee colony or something, then you're always serving the queen bee. It's not about yourself, you're always serving. So you're learning how to serve. You're learning how to be selfless. Rabbi Pinchas of Karetz once said, does anyone speak Yiddish? Alright. Abyssal? German? No. Alright, but this is the way the Yiddish joke goes. That in Yiddish, the word I is ich. And am, what is an arrogant person? Says I am. So we say like I'm smart, I'm very intelligent, I'm very good looking, I'm very rich. So I am in Yiddish is ich bin. Ich bin klug, I am smart. But bin in Yiddish is related to the English word, which is be. So a person that goes, that's the same word. Bin means a bee in Yiddish and in German. So a person that walks around and says ich bin, what are they saying? They're saying I'm a bee. So eventually you become what you say you are. But the depth of that idea is that entering into another form of life is a way to elevate you and to allow you into a further process of elevation. This is the general construct of what we're talking about of gilgal. So again, there's the normal case of gilgal, the normal course of reincarnation, where it's every subsequent life a new image is presented, a new side is presented, and we write that story. And every subsequent life we're evolving, hopefully from the nefesh level, at least into a ruach level, and even possibly into a neshama level. So we're moving from a very selfish place, which is nefesh amachai, the selfish I, to something that's more transparent and giving. And as Ashvas Shura, we're becoming like the Creator. Instead of being creation, which is receiving, we're becoming more creating, which is giving. And slowly we're evolving to that place. And then if we do, we move into a next form of life and a higher level of nefesh, next form of life and a higher level of nefesh, and each subsequent life into a higher level. Right? If there's any things that go wrong, which means that we didn't evolve and we just regressed, or we didn't evolve out of a level of nefesh, adoimet sameach chai, which is the inanimate, the vegetative, and the living, we eventually evolve in our next incarnation into those forms of life for a certain period of time, until we reach our elevation, or until another human being comes and makes a blessing with a proper intention and elevates us, and we have an elevation. And then we'll go back into Gan Eden, into paradise. Now, when we talk about souls, so we say that all the souls that we see that are people that are related physically in this world are souls that are related spiritually, which means that if people are physically related to each other here on this earth, it's because spiritually they come from the same root within the great soul of Adam. In addition to that, and that's not only talking about relationships, physical relationships in terms of like a parent, a child, but even the people that are in our sphere, in our sphere of influence, and the people that we surround ourselves with, are all souls that are connected with us on a spiritual level. People that have bigger influences on larger groups of people, these are people that have more neshama klalis, more general souls. People that have less influence are more neshama pratis, which means specific souls. So we say, let's say there are many souls that come from the right hand of Adam, but then there's the one soul that is the right hand of Adam. That would be a more general soul, and these would be more specific souls. This works in terms of souls. And we said that this also works in terms of people that we encounter. If we encounter a person, and the person immediately rubs us in the wrong way, and we have a certain aversion to this other person, the Arizal says probably this is a person that's like you and comes from the same root of your soul. And the reason why you're here, and the reason why this person is presented to you, is that if you can work on your own character traits to overcome your negative character traits and pursue your positive, you together with the other person will have a proper tikkun. So everything that appears to us in our lives, we just said in terms of people, that all the people that appear to us in life, these are all part of our tikkun. These are all part of our soul elevation. What is our soul elevation? In a very simple words, we said that the soul elevation of a human being is to articulate the positive aspects of who they are. And because of that, there's going to be bigger challenges, because whenever there's a possibility for positive, there's also the challenge of negative, and also to overcome your negative specific tendencies that you struggle with. So you have to deeply be attuned with yourself and ask yourself, what are the things in my life that are positive that I have to pursue, and pursue them, because that is your soul elevation. The same thing also, what are the things in my life that I constantly struggle with and I'm challenged by, and those are the things that actually I have to overcome. That's my soul elevation. Now this also extends, besides when we talk about people, this also extends into all spheres of things in our life. We have likes, physical likes and dislikes. One person likes spicy food, one person likes sweet food, one person likes a particular type of music, another person doesn't like music. Every person has their innate likes and dislikes. All these are indicators to us, again, what is our soul purpose? What is our tikkun? If you have certain likes, and they're positive likes, that's because you're attracted to those sparks. That means, just like your personal tikkun, your own elevation, is by revealing your pure potential, the same thing also, part of our tikkun is to elevate all the sparks, all the divine sparks that exist within this realm of creation that are connected to our particular soul journey. How do we know what are the sparks that we are connected with? The answer is the same way we know who we are. Just like we know who we are because these are the things that we are attracted to. Both positive and negative. And the positive we have to pursue, and the negative we have to overcome. The same thing also with all the things that are our likes and our dislikes, with objects in our life. If you have a particular, even object in your life, this is because you're meant to have this object during this time. We're going to talk in a moment how this exactly works. But if you do have this object in your life, it's a physical thing. You have a car or a bicycle. I don't know what you have. It's a physical object. This object needs you to create a tikkun for it, some type of soul elevation, to evolve it higher, to release sparks that exist within it, to use it for a higher intention. That's what the reason why you really desire it. You think that you desire it because it looks nice and it drives well or it looks good, whatever. That's what you think that you like. Or you want to get this pair of shoes or that pair of shoes, and you think this is what you really want, but the truth is that it's your soul calling out to this object for an elevation, a spiritual elevation. The moment this object becomes lost or outside of your possession, so for example, you own a very beautiful watch, and you feel very connected with it. We're going to say that the reason why you have this object is because your soul connected to this particular object. Yes, it's inanimate, but there's a spirit in everything, and you have to elevate that spirit, whatever it is. You make sure that you look at the time to see good things, want to do the proper things in your life. So you're elevating this inanimate object. You're walking down the street and you lose it. It's lost. Completely lost. You can't find it. You lose it on a beach and it's under the sand. What do you feel? How should you feel? The answer is, you have to understand that when you had it, you were meant to have it. And when you don't have it, you're not meant to have it any longer. The moment this thing is no longer healthy energy for you, it disappears. And if you're going to go pursue it, it's going to be something that's negative. The same thing also if you see an object that belongs to somebody else. This object that belongs to somebody else means they have to have it. And it's not healthy for you to have it. Now, it's a big question of everything I just said now. Because the big question is, we're assuming, and this is going to be the big assumption, that every single desire that a person has, the root of the desire is going to be something positive. It's very important to understand that every single desire that we have. There's a famous story in the Talmud, in the Gemara, it speaks about the 4 sages that entered into the mystical orchard. And Rabbi Akiva says that when you reach a place of shayish, of yesh, when you reach the highest level of keter, do not say al toimer mayim, do not say water. That was his instructions to his students. When you get to a final mystical state, a very deep state of consciousness, don't say water. What does it mean, don't say water? Water is a metaphor of desire. Don't say that there are 2 desires. Higher desire, lower desire. Oh yes, I have a desire to do an act of charity, I have a desire to do a mitzvah, I have a desire to sit and study, I have a desire to pray, and I also have a desire for a nice pair of shoes. Not me personally, but some people. And I also have a desire for this particular object. So you're going to say, mine, they're 2 separate desires. This is my higher desire, this is my lower desire. The answer is no, there's no higher and lower, there's only one desire. Every desire that you have in your life is a desire to connect with Hashem. Simple. It's to connect with your source. To have yichud. Every desire that we have. Then you ask the question, so what does it mean? Okay, I understand if I'm praying or giving charity and doing a mitzvah. But what does it have to do if I'm buying a pair of shoes? The answer is that there's a spark that's calling out for your neshama, your soul, that's connected to your spirit, that needs you to elevate that spark. It's the same thing. So you think you need the shoe, but it's not really. It's the spiritual energy that you're going to receive from receiving that shoe and what you can give back to that shoe. That's the inner desire. So there's only one desire. And every single desire is positive. Every single desire you have is positive. But then you're going to close your eyes for a second. You don't have to tell me what your desires are. And you're going to say, what do you mean? I have such things that I wouldn't tell anybody that I desire. So this means that's a positive desire? The answer is that it's yes. It's a positive desire. And desire is an indicator for you that you have to achieve a tikkun with the object that you are desiring, or the idea that you are desiring. But not every desire, the way to achieve tikkun of that desire is through pursuing it and achieving it. There's something that's called hislapshut, means to be invested in something. You have it on page 2. And there's something that's called dechia. There's something that's called to push aside. Some desires in our life, the way we achieve its elevation is through investing ourselves and actually physically achieving that desire which we desire. And some is precisely by not pursuing it. You have a desire for a new car, an old pair of shoes, and you're going to say that yes, it's a spark reaching out to you. And it's an opportunity for yichud, for unification. But what is the ultimate, the way you're going to achieve yichud is not actually by eating it or taking it into yourself, but by pushing it aside. The way to elevate things, not everything is elevated by actually grabbing onto it. Sometimes some things are elevated by pushing it aside. You push it aside, you release the spark. You have a terrible desire for something, to do something. It's positive. The desire itself is positive. You're not supposed to actually act on it. You're supposed to push aside that desire. You say, I have a terrible desire to God forbid, do something to somebody else. Okay, that means there's some type of connection with the other person. Maybe I just have to push the person aside or not talk to them. Okay, maybe that's the way I'm going to release it. Something has to be released, some sparks have to be released, but not always to actualize the desire itself. In general, I think most people know what are the things in life they should pursue, what are the things they shouldn't pursue. It's pretty much clear. What are things that are healthy for you, what are things that are not healthy for you spiritually, mentally, emotionally. A person can evaluate. What happens if a person is having a real difficulty in knowing, is this something that I actually should pursue? Because this is my tikkun, right? We say that my tikkun, my personal elevation, my soul elevation, for me to go in this lifetime to be megalgal, to go from incarnation to incarnation, to move from the nefesh to the nefesh machayim, to machas, chiyunis, to nefesh hamaskelis, to nefesh hasichlis, to go all these higher levels of soul. I have to constantly be evolving. How do I know if how do I evolve? By observing everything that's going on in my life, pursuing the positive, overcoming the negative. right? That's nafshis. That's within my character. But it's also how I relate to everything around me, to the people around me, and to the objects around me. I'm constantly working on myself to reach higher elevations. So it's in relationships that I have to people and relationships that I have to objects. So here I have this burning desire for this new pair of shoes. Should I go ahead and spend all my last savings to buy this pair of shoes? Or should I push it aside? Is that the elevation or is that the elevation? How do we know? So there are 3 suggestions that I found. And I think this we'll do step by step. The first one is, see, it says on the left column on the bottom, on the second page, whereas uncertainty, positive and negative. So the first one is from Shevet HaMusar, which is a classic book on Musar, and this is not going to help most people, but this is at least going to help after you pursue it. How does one feel afterwards? After you actually ate something that you know you shouldn't eat. You usually don't feel that well, if you're an honest person. After you pursue a desire that you know you shouldn't have, but you feel like, wait a second, maybe I should because this is a really strong desire. How do you feel afterwards? Do you feel, is there still the emptiness there? You pursued it, you achieved it, you did it, okay, you did everything. How do you feel? Are you still left with that nagging emptiness, that feeling of incompletion? Or do you actually feel like, now I feel like a healthy person? The simple answer is that if you're an honest person, you will know that if you pursue something that has meaning, something that has purpose, something that has value, it could be painful while you're doing it. Because it could be hard. Let's give a simple example. You're walking down the street and a little old lady has to cross the street. And you're in a rush. But you take the time to cross the old woman. So while you're doing it, it's like, I don't know, and she stops and she's a smoker and she takes a cigarette in the middle. I don't know. It's like it becomes a whole complicated case, and you have to get the woman across the street, and you're late for a meeting. So while you're doing it, could be painful, but the moment or uncomfortable. But I guarantee you, the moment you cross the street, you're going to feel good about yourself, and maybe feel good about yourself for the rest of the day. And if you didn't, you may feel good about yourself for the first second, because look, I got to my meeting quick. But the rest of the day, if you're an honest person, you're going to feel bad, like, you know what, I really should have helped that old woman. See, that's the difference. When you do something positive, so long as you didn't really mess yourself up over time. But if you're an honest person, relatively an honest person, if it's something that's positive, you're going to feel empowered, you're going to feel full, you're going to feel complete when it's done. And something that's negative, it's going to leave you with that empty feeling and that still sense of emptiness. So that's a classic interpretation of Musar, to know once the action has been done. The Kedushas Levi, which is the Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev, one of the students of the Maggid of Mezrich, a student of the Baal Shem Tov, writes that this is more subtle, but it's an awareness while you're doing the action, while you're pursuing the desire. What state of consciousness are you experiencing? Are you experiencing a constricted state of consciousness or an expansive state of consciousness? Moichet the godless, big mind, or moichet the kat, the small mind. These are subtle states of consciousness that when you're doing something that is correct and you know is correct and should be done and is positive, there's a certain opening. It's not a feeling, it's not a sensation, but there's a certain opening in the mind. The mind feels a certain achava, a certain opening, versus a constriction. Again, this is a more subtle awareness. The third suggestion comes from the Ramban, Nachmanides. The Ramban is not actually found anywhere in his writings, but it's quoted in the name of the Ramban by many texts. So we'll say it in the name of the Ramban. Nachmanides writes like this, and it's a very simple suggestion. In order to evaluate a decision, to know whether you should pursue something or not to pursue it. Because remember, that's part of our tikkun. Part of our tikkun is to know ourselves, to know the objects, to know everything that's around us, to know everything that's going on in our life, to know whether we should pursue it, overcome it, be challenged by it. He says the way to do this is to make yourself impartial in the decision. Pretend it's not about you. Should I buy this pair of shoes or not? Okay, that's a very complicated question because you're very attached to this and you like this and you like beautiful things, whatever. But what happens if you're having an honest conversation with a friend of yours? And you know how much the person has in the bank account, and you know how they spend their money, and you say, and the person asks you, should I do this or not? Pretend it's somebody else. What would you give advice for another person that you're not interested in the outcome for the other person. Completely, maybe a stranger. Someone walks over to you and says, by the way, this is the situation. I have $30 in the bank, the shoe costs $100. Should I go loan money to buy these pairs of shoes? What are you going to tell this other person? The moment you can put yourself out of the equation, to put your ego out of the equation, and imagine that it's an impartial judgment, and that it's just about the other person, then you can properly guide and properly gauge whether this is a positive, something to pursue, and something to overcome. This is generally in terms of objects. So we have it this in terms of likes and dislikes with people, likes and dislikes in general with things in life, and likes and dislikes with and desires that we have also with objects. There's one other point, and then we'll get back to the beginning. There's one other point about this. This is just written up over here in the right column. And this is also important. It's not so connected. It is a little bit connected to what we're talking about, but I think it's important to just add this point. And this is a very simple example, and of course you can use this in many different situations. Okay, you make a decision based on the previous notions, previous ideas that you know, just like with the people, you know which people you should surround yourself with, which people you shouldn't surround yourself with. The person has to know that. There's certain people that feed you good energy, certain people that suck out your energy, certain people that are good people, and therefore you should surround yourself. Certain people resonate, your soul resonates with them, and you should surround yourself with these people because these people are helping your soul elevation. Even we talk about a bashert, someone that's you're destined to marry, the person that's going to be your partner. This is also should be a person, like the Torah calls this person an Ezer Kenegda. Ezer Kenegda means a helper against him. Helper against him is a very interesting phrase, because we're not saying the person's just the helper. We're saying the person's a helper against you. Helper against you means that it's somebody in your life. And that's why a person has multiple levels of soulmates. Because the definition of a soulmate is a person that allows you to be the most you should become, and believes in you the most possible, the biggest person that you could become, but also a person that challenges you to become that person. A person that constantly says in your life, yes, whatever you say is correct, or whatever you do is perfect. That's not kenegdoi. That's not against you. That's an Ezer maybe, but I would say that's even not an Ezer. It's not even a helper. Someone just says, yes, whatever you do is correct, is not someone that's allowing you to move. Someone that's gently and with love and compassion in your life, that's there to help you evolve, but also someone that challenges you and says, okay, you, by the way, you're struggling with anger. You have anger issues. I'm going to try to help you. Together, we're going to work this out. Or I'm going to be encouraging. I'm going to be there for you to overcome this negative tendency. That's a person that's kenegdai. That's a person that's going to help you articulate your soul purpose. And the more a person is an Ezer Kenegdai, the more a person is like you, that helps you, and also challenges you. And there has to be a good balance. It can't be too much challenging and too much helping. There has to be a proper balance between helping and challenging. The more the person is actually is connected to your soul. So we have to surround ourselves with people that are not just encouraging to us, but also challenge us to become more. And certainly not surround ourselves with people that just put us down and just pull you down. But you want to have someone that's lifting you constantly. This extends to relationships with people, and relationships with objects, relationships with time, with everything that you have in your life. You always have to think about how are you articulating and elevating yourself at every moment to a higher state of consciousness. So we know this to be true. And let's assume that a person, I'll give you an example of one, let's say a person is struggling with weight. I don't know why I'm using this example, because no one in this room is struggling with weight. But no one, I know. But let's pretend this is a concept. And the problem is that you're overeating. And you know you're overeating. It's not. So you decide, okay, you know what? From now on, and this is a very trivial example. This is a simple, but it's anything in life. From now on, if I eat dinner, I'm not going to eat dessert. Okay, this is your decision you make. Okay, so the first day it works. Second day you struggle with it and you overcome the dessert. The third day, 10 o'clock at night, you find yourself, your head in the fridge eating dessert. Okay, so then you tell yourself, I'm a hypocrite because I made up that I'm not going to do it. So might just eat the cake, and there's no reason. Then you go back to square one. And this is an example of food, but this is an example of anything in life. Even positive things, you decide you're going to study, you're going to pray, you're going to do another mitzvah, you're going to overcome. Anything you do, your first day it works, second day it doesn't, you get challenged, third day you just say you're a hypocrite because there's too many voices, and you let it go. So what I want to suggest is like this, that you have to just be honest. Honest with yourself means that you give voice to two voices. There are multiple voices. Just recognize there are multiple voices. And when you give voice, when you're honest about your inner voices, there's two voices. One voice says, "I'm hungry. I want this dessert, and I don't care about my decision not to eat dessert." The other voice says, "Wait a second. You just made a conscious decision that you're not going to eat." So what you do is like this. What you say is like this to yourself. Both voices, I hear you. I hear you. And it's really not, it's not an either-or choice. Generally, my higher voice is going to win out. Tonight, I don't have patience to fight with my lower voice. So tonight, my lower voice is going to win. And you acknowledge that your lower voice is winning. Your lazier self, your other self that's always more down on you. And tomorrow, it's going to be different. So I just want to read what you do. Maybe you won't have the strength to win every battle. But make sure you give your deeper self a voice. If you give in to the urging of your lower self and eat the dessert, be honest with yourself about the loss. Own it and not make excuses. It doesn't matter. Big deal, so what? I missed one day. I made a decision, I'm going to do this every single day. Oh, I missed one day. Okay. And then what happens? You miss another day and you say, then you tell yourself, I'm a hypocrite and I should stop. No. I'm messing up tonight. It's very clear to me. I'm honest about it. Even casual will become a slippery slope and be self-blame. Don't make this practice all or nothing situation. Recognize the battle, but you may not have the spiritual energy to overcome every challenge completely. So you say, okay, now I don't have koyach, I don't have strength to overcome this. This is my lower voice is getting the better part of me now, but my higher voice tells me not. In life, you win some or lose some, but with practice, you gradually lose less and less. Success breeds success. Start with the small stuff, the small challenges that you know your deeper self can overcome, and build from there. You have to know yourself. Say, this is something I can overcome. This is a small thing I can overcome. This is going to be the voice that's speaking to me now, overcoming it. If I don't overcome it today, it doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It just means that today, my lower voice won over my higher voice. And when you feel successful in what you're doing, empowered and honest with yourself, you will have the strength, the courage to continue on. And this is very important in terms of any type of challenge. Because ultimately it's about tikkun. Tikkun is about soul elevation. Soul elevation, part of soul elevation, is pursuing those positive traits. But part of soul elevation is actually overcoming those negative traits. You're going to reincarnate and reincarnate and reincarnate and reincarnate over and over again until you work out those things that are negative within your traits. You have to overcome them. And because it's something that's very strong, there's a lot of challenge and it's hard. But we have to learn a technique to overcome the things that are difficult in life. And overcome difficult things in life is not to say, okay, from now on, I swear, bli neder, I'm never going to become angry anymore. I'm a person that struggles with anger. And I'm never going to become angry again. You know that's not going to work. You say that from now on, I usually get angry between 6 and 7 in the evening. Because that's where I'm hungry and the kids or I come home. There's some reason, there's something in my life that's off kilter that causes me to become angry. From now on, from 6 to 6:30 or from 6 to 6:15, I'm in control. What happened 6:15 is out of control, but 6 to 6:15 is in my control. I'm not becoming angry. So the first day you're holding off, you're not becoming angry. The second day, you're having more challenge, but you're holding yourself in. The third day, you're already anger. So what do you tell yourself? Two things. Big deal. So what? I'm angry today. That's not going to help. Big deal. But the problem is if you say that, then tomorrow you'll be angry, the day after you'll also be angry. So what we say is, just be honest. Say, listen, you know what? Today, my lower self got the better part of me. And it's not good. It's not good. And I really feel bad. But I don't have strength to every single day fight. Tomorrow I'm going to fight the new battle. And tomorrow from 6 to 6:15 is sacred. I'm not going to become angry. And you'll see that slowly from 6:15 it becomes 6:20, 6:25, 6:30. And that's the way you build. And this is the way we achieve tikkun. There's one quick thing before we go to questions, because on the first page we didn't get to it. It's a big conversation, but it's related to what we spoke about a little bit, the idea of soulmates. And in one of the earlier texts, Kabbalistic texts, by Rebbe Lezer Germaiza, the Rekeach, he writes a little story, like a little anecdote, that there was a boy in his city of Worms in Germany, and he was a very good-looking kid, and he's a very prestigious family with a lot of money, and he's a brilliant kid. And the parents are trying to convince him to marry a particular girl, and she was also had all the milas, all the external trappings also, and she was beautiful and she was smart, she's intelligent, good family, and the boy didn't want to marry the girl, and instead he found the girl in another city, and the way it's written is that she didn't have all the external trappings that the first girl had, and he was wondering to himself why, what happened, what's the inner dynamics that makes a person, before people became so superficial, that makes a person desire one person over the next. And superficially, you would think that the boy would want that girl, but instead he wants someone else. I mean, really, this is a question of anything. Why does one person attract to the other person to another? What is the dynamics of it? So a little bit about that we spoke about is it has to do with the soul connections, souls that are rooted in the same place, souls that are part of the same elevation. This creates soul dynamics and soul connections. But with regards to a person's destined one, his bashert or her bashert, person that is your real soulmate, the zachem and akeva, that element in the male and female. So he said like this: there's before the soul comes down to this world, the soul becomes vested in a guf dak, in an ethereal-like body, that it looks exactly like the body that eventually you will have, and you live out your whole life. So you're born, you grow up, you get married, you have children, you live out your life, and then you become embodied in your guf gas, in your physical form, and you're living out the story of your guf dak, of your ethereal form. I said, this is a big conversation what exactly this means, but let me just throw out a few little points. The guf gas is your physical body. Okay, so one person has one body, another person has another body. Why do we actually look different? Okay, so we'll say genetics. Okay, that's one thing. But what's the root, the meta root of the difference of looks? The reason why people look differently, and some people are tall, some people are short, is because this is a manifestation of the energy of their soul. That their particular soul needs this particular body to express who they are. One person's soul cannot be in another person's body. It does actually happen. It's unusual, and this is terrible mixing up of bodies and souls, which does happen. It's a whole other conversation. But generally, in the normal course of events, the person's soul is expressed through the person's body. If a person's short, skinny, tall, fat, black, white, green, everything that a person is going to be an expression of the person's spiritual constitution. Their spiritual reality is manifest in their physical form, which means that the physical form is really a spiritual form. So the guf gas, the physical form, is an expression of the spiritual body, which in essence, the physical form is really an expression of the spiritual form. Correct? That spiritual form is called gufdak. That's the form of the body before it actually becomes body. It's like the silhouette of the body, or like this, the energy field of the body. But the energy field of the body, and which incidentally is also called in the language of the Zohar, it's called Chulka Derabanan, and it's also called the Tzel, which means the shadow, which the surrounding. So it is connected with the aura. This energy field is shaped as the body. In the beginning of life, the physical form is a reflection. We use the Hebrew word, the guf gas, the thick body, is a reflection of the guf dak, is a reflection of the ethereal form. But throughout life, there's a symbiotic relationship between the guf gas and the guf dak, because we are also creating the guf dak at every moment, which means every time we have a thought, every time we speak something, we say something, we do something, we feel something, we're projecting energy. This energy is contained in our guf dak. If we are people that are very consistent in our spirituality, which means we're very deeply an expression of our soul, then our guf dak is an exact replica of the guf gas. So much so that there were great tzaddikim and great sages who were able to project their guf dak into another location, which is called bilocation. And if you say this is a very mystical concept, it's actually mentioned in the Talmud, in the Gemara. The Gemara mentions that Rabbi Yehuda, after he passed away, would come make kiddush for his family. The Gemara in Kesuvos. He would come make kiddush for his family. So apparently he was, but of course he was in the grave. He didn't undig the grave and come out with a skeleton. He looked away when he passed away, because his guf dak was completely intact, and he was able to protect himself. This process is something that every soul goes through. Every person, after they pass on, they move from their guf gas into their guf dak. We have to have another full lecture about the process of the near-death experience. But one of the things that people talk about is that people move into like a body of a cloud, like a ethereal-like body. This is the guf dak, because you move from the guf gas into the guf dak, and the guf dak actually contains your full memory. And it is your aura, it is your tzel, it is your energy field that's surrounding you, that's completely you. You can project it, and people can also, in deep meditative, prophetic meditation, you can actually speak to your guf dak. There's also a psychological illness. It's that people see their own self. Double Lincoln suffered with this. Someone knows this word. Anyways, a double hanger or something. But it's like there's a yeah, but there's someone. But it's a psychological problem that you actually you see yourself. You can see yourself, but the prophet, according to Evan Ezra, according to some of the inner writings of the Shus and Saidas, some of the Kabbalistic texts, is that's actually what a prophet does. A prophet enters a meditative state and actually hears himself speaking to themselves. First hears it in their father's voice, which actually says in the Medrash, which Moshe heard Amram's voice when he spoke to him, and then finally that voice becomes into a transparent, higher voice. But the process of leaving this body is not that all of a sudden you drop the body and you're completely disembodied. You enter first into an ethereal-like body. That's the guf dak. The guf dak also, according to other sages, is connected with Eish and Ruach, with fire and wind, because we say that there are four basic elements: earth, wind, fire, and water. Water and earth is the physical elements, and fire and wind is more the spiritual, more the ethereal-like elements. And the guf dak is actually created from the fire and wind element, or something like the angels, like Maimonides holds. And this is the relationship that we have with this guf dak. In other words, in simple language, I don't know if it could be simple language, but the idea is that the physical body is a manifestation of this guf dak, and the guf dak is the energy that's maintained. Throughout life, we project into this guf dak, then we enter into this guf dak eventually until we become completely disembodied in an afterlife process. And the reason why people pick up energy from other people, the reason why some people feel that this person I belong to, this person I'm connected with, that's because your guf dak is speaking to the other guf dak. I don't mean this on a physical speaking level, but the energies are resonating between each other. And the energy of your guf dak is who you are at any moment. Because it's all your thoughts, feelings, actions, and all impressions and memory, and your soul, the form of your soul. Okay, we're going to open it up for some questions now, so we can ask. But you're the first one to ask.
Oh.
You had the question,
I have
yeah.
a lot of questions. So we have these past lives and these past selves and these parts of our souls, right? How does time relate to this? Because we know that nothing truly dies. What we create with our mind is all here. So is it true that all of my past lives are aligned, and still a part of me, or where?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. So the question was, how does time come into play? And the truth is that we use all these terminologies because we're physical beings. So we say past life, future life, the soul is here, we're there. Here, there, past, future doesn't exist in the spiritual realm. So even though we're talking about it, we're having a conversation about the souls in the present life, and we're saying it's connected to a past life, it's only from our perception that it becomes now that it's past. From a perception of beyond time, which means from the soul of passing, the past and the future are all in one. So much so that some people that read the writings of the Ari and some of the earlier writings, they ask a very simple question. Sometimes the Arizal seems to get his history wrong, because sometimes he says that person number 1 reincarnated the person number 2. But if you read history, even secular, non-Jewish people, he said, but if you read the history, you'll see that person number 2 lived before person number 1. So obviously the Arizal made a big mistake. And the answer is no, he didn't make a mistake, because that's exactly sometimes the way it works. You can be reincarnated from a person that exists in the future, not from the person that exists in the past, because past and the future is only in the perception of where you're existing. In this realm, you're now in this unit of time, and this is past and this is future. But in this realm, which is beyond time, past and future is all part of the same. There is no time. So normally, the conventionality is that it works within the way we understand it. So it's always working that the past, reincarnation, is moving into the present, in what we would call the past and what we would call the present. But there is a deeper understanding that since there is no past and future, you can actually be a reincarnation of a person that will exist in 100 years from now, in real time. So that's why it's very tenuous when we talk about, and very subtle when we talk about what it is, past or future. We have to understand that we're giving language to something that really cannot be used in proper language, because we don't have language yet.
We have some questions from online.
Okay.
The first one is, could you speak about the concept of an Ibor, signs and symptoms?
Okay. First of all, let's just say that, God willing, we'll have to do a whole other lecture on Ibor. And we just scratched the surface. We didn't talk about the afterlife, Gan Eden, Gehenna, and all that stuff. The whole afterlife process we didn't talk about. But Ibor in general means impregnation. And impregnation means that you become impregnated with a person's soul that already passed away in general. So let's say in a past life you reach a certain elevation. This life you're being challenged for a certain thing and you can't overcome. It's possible that a soul that exists in a previous life, that's now part of Gan Eden, back into the great soul of Adam, will become embodied as a guest in the language of the Ari. Like an Orach, it becomes a guest inhabiting your body for a certain period of time. You become impregnated, which means that you get an additional dosage of spiritual energy to overcome this challenge, and then it disappears from you. This can also happen, you can actually have also Ibur Mechaim, which means two people that are alive, simultaneously alive in this world, and one person will have an impregnation of a person that he's connected with. So it doesn't have to be necessarily the soul of a person passed away. You can be impregnated with a person that's alive even. The way to become impregnated is actually a practice. First of all, it's ulei hai ve'ulei. It has to be a gift that's given to you from above. But there's also, one of the reasons why people will go to pray at the graveside of a tzaddik, for example, is maybe to get an ibur of the tzaddik. So if you do an action that's similar to the action that this tzaddik has done, if you start learning the person's teachings and praying like them and doing their actions, you align yourself with their energy, and maybe you can actually receive an ibur from them. This is generally a positive thing. The flip side of this is negative, which is a debuk. The word debuk doesn't appear in Kabbalistic texts till very recently, till like in the 1800s. The original word for debuk is ibur ra, which means a negative ibur, a negative impregnation. These are souls that are not elevated, not reaching their state of Gan Eden, not being able to disembody completely. They're still surfacing in this planet. They're naked souls that don't have nothing to grasp. They become impregnated with the person, and they overwhelm the other person. Yeah, other question?
Does it say it's connecting?
Yeah.
February?
It says connecting right now.
It says it's connecting.
Yeah.
Okay, so unfortunately we must have lost our connection at this point, but there were still some other questions.
You want to ask one other?
Alternate?
Yeah, we'll ask. Yeah, one. Yeah.
Okay.
So the question was shared.
Yeah.
I'm assuming because people lose people in this life and are happily with somebody else. That
Yeah.
there's more than one to share. Is that true or not true?
There's a few things. First of all, when we say a person's bashert, and that's called a zivug rishon, like the first zivug, and then the zivug sheni, which is the second zivug, the second marriage, this doesn't necessarily mean in sequence, which means that a person could be married to zivug sheni, the second bashert, and then afterwards get married to his real bashert. That's possible, or she get married to his real bashert. That's also possible. Zivug rishon and sheni is not in time. It means in order, which is your proper soulmate. Having said that, there are multiple levels of soulmate, because souls are rooted in the same area within this general soul of Adam, are souls that are connected to your soul. They're not your perfect half, but you can be pretty much happy with a person that's even not your perfect half. In fact, there's some Kabbalists that write that to really know whether a person's married to their perfect bashert or married to someone that's in the realm of their basherts, you can't really know till the day you pass away. It says if you can look back on your whole life and you're married for a long time, and you can say, I had a wonderful marriage and it only worked on helping me, and it was always challenging me to become my better self, and it was all perfect, well, then maybe you can say that. But you don't know. No, and it's not really so relevant, because so long as the person is within the realm of helping you in your tikkun, this is the person that you should be with. Yeah, we're going to ask the question from here, yeah.
The next question is, what is the relationship in the guf hadak and one's bashert?
No, there is no real relationship with guf hadak. We just gave an example that some of the earlier Kabbalistic texts, when they speak about bashert, when they talk about a soulmate, they actually say that the reason why a person is attracted to this person and to the other person, even though logically maybe if you were a shapchin or you were a matchmaker, you wouldn't put these two people together. You would think maybe those two people put together, but it doesn't work. It's people that you don't think sometimes are perfectly together, because these two people were married, quote unquote, in a guf dak realm. Before they came out of this world, they were connected. They had a regular body and they were connected. It doesn't mean literally, but that means that these souls are connected. That's the reason why we brought down guf dak and bashert. Yeah.
You said that the guf gas is the representation, your present state of the guf
Correct.
dak, like this is how you're portrayed.
Yeah.
So many people kind of say that you look like your name. They kind of feel that they grow into that. Is your guf dak kind of influencing your parents in naming, or is there any connection to that?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. And that is the reason why there are rewrites in one of the Agdamas and Emak HaMelech and other Kabbalists write that the night before a person is named, let's say it's a boy and he's having a bris or a girl, whatever a person's name, and if you don't have a name, it's the night before you decide that you're going to give yourself a name. The night before you receive the name, there's a small level of prophecy, a minor form of prophecy, that the parents have, or whoever's naming you, says that's your name. And that means because the name will be connected to your body and to your spirit and to your spiritual evolution. So there'll be a very deep connection between your name. If you don't have a name, you should get a name. You should get a Hebrew name, and you have to obviously meditate and go into a proper state as if you're going to give yourself a name to get the proper name. And it has to, and it'll come to you. It'll come to you. It's not the name that necessarily you're going to think of. I know for myself, because we had children and we had to name the children. Sometimes we thought, okay, the name will be this if it's a boy, and this if it's a girl. And even till the last minute we said this, and then somehow 5 minutes before we said, no, it's actually, it's this name. And that became the name, and I don't see how the kid can be any other name. So that's the way it works. We're going to go back to the...
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you kind of answered this partly, but is there such a thing as a person who is possessed by a demon? If so, how does that happen?
Well, first of all, I mean, we have to... What is a demon? I mean, it's another... There is a concept of debuk, which is a soul that has not yet been elevated. The soul that has not yet been elevated is because a soul, it's a person, in very short, it's a person that's so connected to this physical realm that they first, again, we should say that we're going to do this once in a full proper lecture, but let me go very quickly. There's something called Olam HaDimyon, the world of imagination, that the first state that a person has to elevate themselves is to realize actually they pass away, that they passed away. But a person that's so connected to the body, the first stage is that they don't realize that they died. So what they do is they basically do what they did yesterday before they passed away. So if yesterday they woke up in the morning and they took out the garbage, that's what they do the next morning. There's no body, there's no garbage, but that's what they do. No one sees them, no one hears them, but that's what they do. Because this is they live in the world of imagination. How this works, how we can interact with them is a whole other question. But there's something like that. And then, when they finally come to the realization that they have no body any longer, they look for a body to inhabit, so they can be in a body. But these are souls that shouldn't be in a body, and that's called a debuk. It's not a demon. It's a soul that you become possessed, you become overwhelmed with this body, and you have to go through a process to elevate yourself. In general, I would say most people that think they're possessed should just visit a good psychologist. There's a story with Reb Chaim Brisker. Chaim Brisker was a very wise sage. The story I've told many times, that someone once came to him and said that he's possessed. It was actually a woman, we'll say the story with the man. He came and says he's possessed. And that was the time, they just came out with alarm clocks at that time. And Reb Chaim was the Rabbi Brisk, he was the only one that had this alarm. So, and this woman came and said that they're possessed, they have these thoughts and these sordid ideas and this. And he said, you know what, I have a mystical gadget. And it tells time. And go to sleep tonight. If you hear a loud noise coming out of this thing, that you'll know is the sound of the debuk leaving your body. He set the alarm clock for 12 o'clock. The alarm went off and the person was healed. So you have to make sure that most times it's just... but it's possible. It's possible. Very usual, but possible. Yeah.
Does you said it's like wiped a memory of the past lives are wiped clean. I mean, can you?
Wait! I never said that.
No, I'm saying in the next.
It's not wiped clean. Not wiped clean.
No, it's stored.
It's stored, right? So the new soul is new, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm saying like in the next physical life,
yeah.
There's no memory of the previous life.
There's no conscious memory of the previous life. Because the conscious memory, it's almost like if this is the backdrop of one life, so you're writing one story, this now moves here, and now you have another part of it. But these are part of one soul, it's one unit. But now you're having a new blank sheet.
Right.
So there is a relationship between these two sheets because it's part of one soul. So that's on a super conscious level. Some people can have like premonitions or deja vu experiences where they're having some type of intuition that they exist in a past life, they exist here, they were here. But to have a conscious memory, I remember exactly what I did and I speak those languages, that's very, very unusual. When that happens, it's probably not a normal case of gilgal. It's probably a case, either it could be ibur, an impregnation, or it can be like a gilgal, the same thing we spoke about different gilgal into different forms of life, where the full memory exists in other forms of life. It's also possible for a person to exist and as an additional soul in another human being. So the person's speaking, but it's not really that person that's speaking that's having the memory. It's sort of the spirit that's speaking through them. That's why a lot of times, incidentally, when there are authentic cases of little children that have spoken different dialects, and apparently they didn't have memory of their previous life. Over time, they forgot. And I don't think it's just because they just forgot the dialect. I think it's because that the soul that exists within them is no longer within them. So they're no longer conscious memory.
I actually had a further question
Yeah.
about that. Because like when I was a child,
Yeah.
I had this recurring dream
Uh-huh.
for like 6 years.
Wow.
And it was a very vivid dream.
Mhm.
And I just felt like it was like a very specific experience. And looking back now, is that something that could have been a connection to a previous
Absolutely.
life?
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely. Because dream would be a place where things that are stored in a very deep place within your psyche, within your soul, will become revealed. We're talking about conscious, awake memory, alpha, beta memory, when you're in that wavelength. When you go into the other wavelengths, then you're tapping into other resources in your soul. On a very, very, very deep level of our soul, we are all souls at all time. Right? Because we all come from the great soul of Adam, so we're connected with all of the past, all of the future, and with everything that exists. That's what Ruach HaKodesh is. That's what really prophecy is. A person that evolved their soul to such a place that everything collapses, all barriers collapse. And there's this complete transparent openness of everything. Yeah.
You said that you have the one piece of paper and then it comes, there's another piece of paper that comes down. Does the soul have a shape? Those various parts have a shape of a whole?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They always have the shape of the whole. Do they always? You're asking if it's always complete, or it's always?
So in other words, the blue sheet goes up and the red sheet is here.
Yeah.
And so, what's the relationship between those two?
The relationship.
And the various other parts.
So the relationship is that they're part of one soul, they existed within one body at periods of times, maybe through many, many generations, because they could have been existing for many, many years together, many different lives. So they are part of one soul. But on a conscious level, which means on an awake level, we don't have memory of that. So there's less connection. There is spiritual connection between these souls, and that's why, like we spoke about a little bit last week, certain things that are easier in our life, in this life, like the Ramchal talks and other Kabbalists talk. Let's say a person was poor in one life, then the person will become rich in the next life. A person that's poor in one life, they have to learn how to receive. In the next life, they're going to be wealthy. They have to learn how to give. So the person that's now giving knows how to receive already, if he was poor, right? Or a person that's now receiving knows what it means to give, but now he's learning how to receive. So there is movement between one soul and the next, because we're constantly evolving. In each life, we're learning to articulate something else, to develop something else.
Each of these parts of this soul and these different parts in different lifetimes is one individual soul, which is then.
It's considered one soul, yes. It's considered one soul.
And then that soul may be part of a larger.
They're always part of a larger soul. They're all, because like you said, they're units. So you have, let's say, this is a very physical metaphor, but let's say you have souls that are connected to the pinky, and they're all connected to the part of Adam's soul, then they're all connected to the hand. That's one soul. Then they're all connected to the entire arm. Then they're all connected to the entire body. So there's individual, but they're all part of a bigger collective and a bigger collective and a bigger collective.
So then when somebody dies, they're either going up or they're going. Are all
Oh, no.
animals and all plants definitely some level of human soul that didn't
No,
evolve?
no, not all. Yeah.
We had two
Okay, yeah.
questions.
Yes, quickly, yes.
Very quickly, the first question is, could you speak about the concept of Dayona and how that relates to Gufda? I don't know. It's
What's Dayona?
Dayona. Dayona? I don't know what that is personally.
I don't even know what that is.
Okay.
Ask the person what the young is.
Oh, Diokna. They just typed in DEYOK.
I don't know what that is. Is that like a... No. Maybe it's a... Maybe it's a... Oh, Dechia? Oh.
They typed in likeness of a likeness rock.
Oh. So what is the question again?
So the question is, could you speak about that concept, and how it relates to Gufda?
Oh no, it's a different topic. It's a different issue. When we say that it's the likeness of a likeness, it means that we're created with the likeness of the Creator. that the human being is created b'tzelem Elokim. And b'tzelem Elokim means that we're created in the likeness of the Creator. This is talking about a specific type. That means every single person has a very distinct body, and the distinction of the person's body is a reflection of the distinction of the form of their soul, which is their gufdak.
And the last question from online is, you said in your book that souls have colors. How can we know what color our soul is?
Okay, I never meant literal colors. So let's be clear. What I meant by colors means that a person have natural inclinations. Colors is very arbitrary because it's the way, it's like a feeling. What do you say? Let's say blue or white is a giving color. It's a kind color. And red is a harsh color. Of course, red is not harsh and white is not chesed and red is not gvura. But this is the way we assume, the way we look at things. This is the way it awakes. So we're saying the soul has a color, the soul has a certain type. That means we're born with natural inclination. Some people are naturally more giving than others. Some people are naturally more judgmental than others. Some people have more chesed and some people more have gvura. This is by nature, we have these traits. This is who we are. Then we have to, if it's positive, we have to pursue them and overcome them, and overcome the negative. And if it's negative, we have to same thing. And each person has to work on their own specific thing that they have to work on.
Thank you, Rabbi Pinson.
Thank you. Do